This is the Aces Up Your Sleeve podcast, and we're the Aces Up Your Sleeve in relationships, from romantic to workplace, parental to platonic, your relationship with yourself, and everything in between. Let us, two autistic aspec kinky therapists, be your secret weapon in neurodivergent life.
This is your disclaimer. This is not therapy or therapeutic advice, and we are not on the clock. This is for entertainment purposes only. This is not a replacement for therapy. What you'll hear are our thoughts on different topics, what we might do in the situation, and how we've supported others through similar things. Hello, and welcome to the Aces Up Your Sleeve podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina.
And I'm your other host, Cade.
And we are super excited today to have our lovely guest come and talk with us about the differences between OCD and autism. Dr. Karissa Burnett, her, is a depth psychologist and trauma specialist known for bridging science with soul. As the founder of Divergent Pathways and a late diagnosed autistic ADHDer herself, she offers transformative therapeutic assessments and therapy intensives that help clients come home to their true selves. She's been featured in National Geographic and the APA's Monitor on Psychology magazine for advancing neurodiversity affirming care. And she is committed to disability justice, providing consultation to the ACLU, and using her voice to promote systemic change. If you're located in California, Massachusetts, New York, Washington, and you want an assessment or you want to attend a therapy intensive, I bet she'd even explain what that is to you if you were interested. Or if you're a clinician located anywhere and want to consult with her, check out the show notes for all of her links.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today, Karissa.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, you two. I'm excited.
We're excited to talk
have you.
OCD. Yeah, and to have you.
Yeah.
Yeah. We get lots of questions about OCD, and you see it a lot in online spaces too. You know, people wondering, like, is this ADHD, OCD, autism? Am I just quirky? So I think our questions today really echo that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of overlap and people get confused, especially with how like colloquialized OCD has become of like, oh, well, you like things neat, so you must be OCD or this, that, and the third. And so I'm hopeful we can dispel some myths and get some things accurate.
Sweet. Yeah, it's kind of in prepping, it was almost hard to get a pulse on what it truly is, but hopefully we can get into it and make some things clearer.
Well, let's jump right in. Most of our listeners do know what autism is. Lots of them are autistic themselves. But could you start us off by explaining what OCD is?
Yeah. So when it comes down to it, with OCD, a person is disabled by self-doubt. So that's really like at the heart of it. So it's not just about being anxious or having repetitive thoughts or repetitive behaviors, kind of how it looks on the outside often. It really comes down to being about not being able to trust your own mind, your intentions, or your sense of self. And since I'm a deaf psychologist, I have to bring in Freud for a second because I think it can be helpful. He called it the doubting mania back in the day.
That makes sense because it can look and feel like you're getting very spun up with whatever it is that you're focusing on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you'll hear like it's defined by obsessions and compulsions. Yes. And so what that means is like an obsession, maybe there's an intrusive thought, image, or urge, but it throws you into doubt. So that's the key thing. Like it's doubt about your character, your safety, your intentions. And then the compulsive piece, that's what like something you do to try to make that doubt go away. That can look like classic checking behaviors someone might think about, but also can look like confessing, mentally reviewing, seeking reassurance. And the cruel part, what's really interesting about this is like the doubt is often an imagined possibility and can really be like the opposite of the person's true self and true character. And it can be really, really distressing to get kind of trapped in this doubt about yourself.
So confessing like behavior you were just talking about sounds to me like it would be extra challenging for an autistic person who might have very like direct styles of communication or like kind of a lot of challenge with like not stating the thing, which is something that I hear often from autistic folks. Is that something you see commonly?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. That probably is part of why OCD does seem to be a lot more common in autistic people. There's also often like this gaslighting of the autistic person's perception and feelings since they were young. That often is a thing, not always, but often. And I think that can contribute to OCD because when it comes down to it, from like a depth perspective, the person who has OCD often certain feelings have kind of been defended against, and there's a tendency to default to go into the mind to figure out, well, what if da da da, and really, really in the mind. But if you were more in your true feelings, that can help make decisions or figure out the answer and stuff. But it's like OCD is a trap because you're in your head instead, and the head can't always figure it out.
Makes sense. And our brains love to fill in blanks too. So if we're curious about something, wondering if there's not certainty, the human mind loves to try to fill it in. And sometimes we fill it in with things that are not accurate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, our first question for today, we've got, how do I know if I have OCD or if it's my autism making me weird? I like to count everything I do, like putting away groceries or steps I take to get the mail, and I need to know what's happening a day or more ahead. I have a vivid imagination and worry a lot about what bad accidents might happen. I worry about going to therapy in case they freak out at some of my thoughts and send me to a hospital or involuntary hold. Is there a test I can take online?
A lot of good questions there that do reflect some common things I hear and fears underneath it. It sucks that they're so prevalent. Um, but okay, so there's a few pieces there. Um, First off, it's really about what's going on underneath. So it's about what it's for, the behaviors. So autistic routines, autistic behaviors, organizing, things like that are usually something what's called ego syntonic. So that means like aligned. It feels good. There's something regulating about it. There's something positive or adaptive, healthy. It's not hurting anyone or the person. Whereas an OCD type behavior, it comes from fear. Like fear is underneath, dread. Um, if I don't line this up a certain way or collect this thing, what if, oh no, and like there's this real like fear that if they don't do the thing, what if like something really bad could happen? So that's the main differential there. It can be hard to parse out sometimes, but it's really about the function. So there are questionnaires online. One is called the YBOCS. Another one's called the OCIR. I know for sure the OCIR is available on novopsych.com. But with these questionnaires, and especially the YBOCS, when I think about it, it has like obsessions and compulsions, but there's often such a intersection with like just compensatory behaviors for ADHD or autism, for example, like checking that I locked the door. Various people could answer that they do that a lot. But the question is what's happening if they don't go back to check the door? Why do they feel driven to check the door? Is it because they have made that mistake before and it's actually like, yeah, maybe it makes sense to check it? Or are they checking it for the ninth time because something in them won't let them believe that they have locked it? And like, it's this real deep fear and dread that, oh my God, if I don't go back again, so even
And is the
taking those
fear
questionnaires.
is the fear and dread there? Because like this is a great example. I literally just like drove not all the way home, but I hadn't gotten all the way to work, but back a good little bit back into my neighborhood to double check that I'd closed the garage because I've forgotten to do that like 3 or 4 times in the past, like this calendar year. And so my fear and dread was like, shit, I've forgotten to do this again. Like, you know, all these different things, right? But that would be different than like an OCD fear or dread would maybe be something that was like less attached to like something that has actually happened in the past. Does that feel accurate?
Yeah, that's a tough one. You're almost bordering in the territory a little bit, I would say. There's a fine line.
It's
Yeah,
hard because there's so much nuance. I mean, if
right.
that happens maybe just once this year or twice this year, if this is like starts
Mhm,
happening weekly,
mhm.
I think that
We're
also
on
might
month
push us
6. I've
in.
done it 4 times.
Yeah, because frequency and intensity, I think, really matter. Correct me if I'm wrong, Carissa, but
Yeah,
for
no, you're right.
OCD. Yeah. Because I know
Yep.
there's been times where when life feels out of control, I definitely, checking, did I lock the door? Because at some point my partner had left it wide open. And luckily the cats didn't run away, but we have cats. And that fear, even though I'm pretty sure I closed it, I would have to go back and double check. And then when life feels a little more regulated, I don't do that. But that type of stuff trickles more into the OCD area because the fear and dread of it, I couldn't not go back and check. I couldn't just, call and wake him up and be like, "Can you go check the front door?" I think I didn't. I had to go see it for myself.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's a good example of maybe where it does veer into that territory. It's a very common tendency in autistic people to be a bit obsessively inclined, which is like this tendency to kind of go in the head, which I know is a little abstract, but we tend to we think bottom up and there's like a loopiness and we're monotropic and driven
Well,
often
there's
toward like a feeling of like completion, right? And the pattern. So it all kind of lends itself to this. Go ahead, Sabrina.
the term for autism in a lot of different languages is something around being in their own world, being in their own head, being in their own space and time. Like there are lots of languages that have formed their understanding of autism around exactly what you're saying about like being in your own head.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you feel about this person's worry that if they go to therapy, the therapist will freak out and hospitalize them? Is that similar to what you've seen therapists react to OCD thoughts with?
I haven't seen it firsthand, but I can imagine that probably with people who aren't trained in OCD, there might be some, I don't know if I could swear on here, but
Yes, you
um,
can.
You are
fuckery.
very welcome to say
I,
fuck
I
yeah.
could I could imagine there's been some fuckery, so I don't want to like minimize or discount that if that has happened. But if a clinician knows about OCD, like they should know this inherently what the person is so afraid of or seeing like an intrusive thought that's really disturbing or something. They should know that's probably actually the opposite of what the person wants. Like it's distressing, it's disturbing to them. um, it's not aligned with their character, and that's a lot of the work is helping them realize that. Literally, it's doubt, not desire, and good clinicians know that, and it is really important to work with a clinician if you're experiencing these things. I mean, because even like the online questionnaires, maybe it's helpful to get a feel for it, but again, it's so much about like the function, what's underneath it, and it could be really helpful to work with a clinician to kind of tease that out and figure out when you're in more OCD space because it almost has like an energy signature, which I could talk about in a sec. But go
Yeah.
ahead.
I was just
Yeah.
gonna say I'm with you on some of those online assessments. I use the Y box and the Psy box, which is like the children's version with my clients, but it turns into more of a discussion, especially anything where there's like it could be a sensory reason or it could be an OCD reason. It could be a expectation sensitivity reason or it could be and when you're home alone at your computer, you're doing it by yourself, there's not that room to have the conversation to parse out like what is under it as much. I will also say before you jump into that energy piece, the person who wrote in didn't say anything like this, but I know that one of the big worries with, quote unquote, like getting sent away to a hospital or an involuntary hold usually comes with some of the more taboo topics that OCD can prompt, kind of like what you were saying about ego dystonic. So anything around incest, pedophilia, homicidal thoughts, or any of those more intense taboo ones, I would recommend making sure that whatever provider you want to reach out to specifically lists on their website that they help people with that, because those are the ones where I've heard the most harm getting done by clinicians who just don't recognize that it's OCD. They think it's something else. They misunderstand mandated reporting, or they get freaked out and go outside of their wheelhouse. All those types of things are possible.
And
Right.
especially finding like a specifically anti-carceral therapist. A lot of times they will list it again on their website, things like that. Those are going to be therapists who don't believe in involuntary holds and in hospitalization that does not have client consent attached to it or involving police systems of any kind.
But I'd love to hear more of what you're thinking about that energy signature, because I think I know what you mean, but I don't know if I could put it into words.
I'll give it a shot. But great points you just said. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's nuances, but overall, It's so trippy. There's often so like the person with OCD tends to be in their head, right? And almost like in their imagination. It's the imagination that goes with this doubt and then like makes a whole scene or like gives all this what if ba 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 it could happen ba 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 and then you're like picturing what could happen and it's all like in the head and it's like a spiral and it goes and goes and goes. That has like this energy signature. It's almost like the idea is if you could catch it, that's helpful because it feels different than other baseline like experiences or feelings. It feels like insecurity, dread, fear. There's no answer. Keep going, just filled with doubt in the head, imagining. And if you really work on it, eventually, at least I'm grateful I got to this point in my own OCD journey of life. But I'd be like, wait, whoa, I'm in my imagination right now. I'm in like this what if spiral. I can like check it and like tell sometimes. I try.
It's almost like lucid dreaming.
Kinda. That's a good comparison. Yeah.
Like, it
But
reminds
like
me
a
of
like hell instead. Yeah.
yeah, like, a lot of my work with my BPD has been to understand, like, when am I in rejection brain is, like, how I kind of coin it for
Yeah.
myself, right? And so, like, when something has happened and I'm like, yeah, like, building that narrative, and then if I'm this kind of person, well, no, I can't be, and so they must be this kind of person, like, that kind of space, like, feels very similar to me actually as similar times that I have, like, lucid dreams where it's like, I can tell, like, it almost feels dissociative, like, I'm sitting there watching myself be like, "Hey, friend, like, that's not you haven't eaten in a couple hours. Can you eat something? Can you, like, drink something? Can you, like, call someone who you know loves you?" Like, all the skills I've built and all the things that I know, especially as a therapist, that might help. But then there's also the me that's inside of it, and he's like, "Kind of no." Like, kind of, "I'm in this right now, and, like, why are you trying to poke holes in what's happening?" And there's, like, that to me, like, lucid dreaming sometimes feels a little bit like I'm fighting myself, like I'm trying to, like, both have control and not have too much control so that it's still a dream. And yeah, it just feels almost similar to what you're talking about, this, like, stuck in the imagination with a different energy around it.
Yeah. That definitely sounds very familiar to that. Similar. Yeah. That's cool you lucid dream. I mean, I'm just thinking about that. But yeah,
Very rarely.
I think it is similar. Yeah.
The way people externalize it too, like when you finally get someone to talk about those thought loops, it feels a little different than other concerns might feel too. I usually notice like a pressured nervousness if they'll even talk about it. For some folks, they feel like just sheerly talking to a therapist or anyone about it will make it more likely to happen. So kudos
Mm,
to the folks who write in and talk about this stuff because it can be scary to even go there.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, our next one is my parents have told me I'm OCD because of how neat and orderly I kept my room growing up, how structured I need everything to be comfortable, the way I organize my food at meals, how I say the same greetings and goodbyes, the way I style my hair the same, because I ask the same questions a lot to make sure everyone is agreeing, and more. What is an OCD evaluation like for people with autism? My autism evaluation was very long and included school testing when I was in elementary. Is there a way I can know if I have OCD without going to an evaluation?
Yeah, so sounds like we've got some of those pop culture vibes going on. Oh, you're OCD. At least that's my impression so far from what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
A lot of those were
But
very pop culture-y.
And a
yeah,
lot of them are so common for autistic folks.
yeah,
The way you organize your food, does that mean it can't touch? Does that mean it's like you eat favorite first or favorite last? Like, so curious to know more. Yeah.
right. Okay, we'll take the food not touching example. What comes to mind for me is like, okay, if it was OCD, what would happen if some of the food did touch? And does it feel like, oh my God, there's this like dread, deep, like, fear that if it touches, that means something. Deep down, there's often what's called this feared self. So, like, fear of being a messy person who's reckless and contaminating everything and just messing up all over the place. And I don't know. So it'd be like, is there something tied to it underneath that they're afraid of would happen if the food's touching that it would like represent about them or like, yeah, be too much to handle versus a more autistic, like same food preference, just the
Sensory.
enjoying it. Yeah, sensory wise, if it's something, sensory is probably a big reason for the different
We get
foods not touching.
soggy.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like all that makes sense from an autistic lens.
Similar with the how I say the same greetings and goodbyes. We're known to have little catchphrases or the same intonations in the way we say things. But like what Chris is saying, I would wonder, is there some dread under, if I don't greet this person this exact way, then they're going to get hurt or they're going to get sick or I'm going to get hurt. Yeah.
Right.
The friendship
Yeah.
won't pan out if I don't do it in the
Yeah.
orders that I needed it to. It sounds to me like, because one of the things that concerns me a lot in the therapist space, and kind of in general, but I think therapists in some ways like lead the way on this, is the way that like we conflate neurodivergence with only ADHD and autism. Very rarely people will also include OCD, but then you're looking for an assessor and you're looking for someone neuroaffirming, but maybe they only know about autism and they don't know a lot about OCD. And so like that kind of nuance you just pulled out, I would think that if they wanted an assessment, especially as someone who's already been diagnosed with autism, they'd want someone very like specially trained in both autism and OCD. Does that feel useful?
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely would want somebody confident in OCD and what it looks like and being able to differentiate rather than just, yeah, diagnostic overshadowing is the term when like, oh, I'm just going to assume it's because you're this without actually like parsing it apart. Yeah.
That does happen quite a bit, yeah. So for this person or anyone who's interested, this one's asking, like, what is an OCD evaluation like for people with autism? How would you describe it? I know you do assessments, Carissa.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really trying to collaboratively figure out and get insight into with the person, like what is actually happening underneath. For example, let's talk about masking for a second. This is an interesting thing where there's a bit of a fine line, I think. Masking in general, doing things to try to survive, code switching, looking different, saying things differently, etc. But then often for a lot of autistic people, there might be like a replaying afterward of the social encounter, etc. When it veers into OCD territory is when it'd be like, well, I must have been weird. I know I was weird. How do I know if I wasn't weird? What if they don't like me anymore? Blah blah. Because I'm such a fuck up, and they saw it, and like repetitively, like going in a spiral where you're so awful and going to be found out. um, then I'd say you're in more of that obsessive land. There's a couple different like forms of treatment, I'd say. It's a slight tangent, but in case it's helpful. There's ERP, which is like the classical one that you'll hear of, like exposure response prevention, where the idea is helping the person have the obsessive doubt, thought, image, whatever it is, without doing the compulsion and learning they can tolerate it. Whereas this newer frame called ICBT, I as an inference, this one is thought to be more neurodiversity affirming and is getting more popular. And it teaches like the logic of OCD and like how to notice that point when you veer into imagination land. And that could be helpful for autistic people to kind of like learn how it's actually operating.
Imagine, especially with how, like, because I know that there are a lot of critiques about ERP in the autistic community because so many autistic folks have been asked to essentially like tolerate and like expose themselves to like sensory overwhelm, and that like that's
Right.
never going to go away through an ERP thing. Only it will only get more masked or something like that. And so I imagine the ICBT might be also just safer to try, so that if you're not like sure, is this an OCD thing or is this an autism thing, you can try it this way and see what you can like parse apart without accidentally doing more harm if it is an autism thing.
Yeah. That's a good point. Good idea. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's getting more and more popular. So if looking for a provider to help parse it out or to work through it and treat it, ICBT is a cool thing to look for in a therapist.
I was in a consult group a couple months ago now, and somebody was an OCD specialist, and they were talking about how they're starting to learn how to use parts work for OCD. And it sounds like there are some contraindications sometimes where you wouldn't want to use that for specific clients, and it might actually reinforce things, but that could be a cool route that's coming out soon too, or people figuring out how to do the parts work and looking at that self-doubt as a part and the fear as a part, and what do those parts of you need? So
Hmm,
yeah.
I like it. It's good stuff.
I was just gonna say, it sounds like when looking for an evaluation, it might not be quite as, like, structured and intensive as an autism evaluation, but it might still be a few of the kind of screeners, and then maybe a more in-depth interview style, conversation to kind of parse things apart with a lot of nuance, especially if you're autistic.
Yeah, I'd say that's definitely what I would want in an assessment. They might give checklists and stuff, but yeah, if you could find somebody who's willing to actually like discuss it, that would be good. A lot of the neurodiversity affirming providers were tending to be more collaborative and therapeutic in the way we do assessments, and have more like interviewee back and forth style. So hopefully, it's out there more and more. There's something else I wanted to say. Now I just forgot it. Ah, go ahead if you had a thing and I'll come back to
When
it.
it comes back, interrupt us.
Yeah, I'll try. Yeah.
I was just over here chuckling like, wow, who would have thought that interviewing people and hearing their side of things during an assessment could be useful? It's just so wild how the medical model used to do things and how people are shifting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Who would have thought? No, it's
It makes me
ridiculous.
wonder how the medical model ever got anybody right. Does that make sense? Like, how
Yeah.
they accurately diagnosed anyone within that system, if that is how they were doing it. It's so confusing to me.
Chris, so this person also said their autism eval back in elementary school included school testing. I assume that for OCD, they won't have to do like IQ testing or any of those like processing speed type of tests.
No, I don't think those would be helpful. The only thing that just came to mind as potentially helpful is like the Rorschach. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't give that anymore. That's like that old school projective test with like, what do you see?
They did one of those with me at the hospital.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, when I was a teenager. God, I wish I could remember or had access to any of my documentation from that. But yeah,
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
I was hospitalized as a teenager, and one of the tests that they did on me in the hospital was a Rorschach.
Huh, that's cool. Yeah, because in theory, like, that might pick up some of the underlying, like, thought processes and doubt and stuff, but other than that, like, the school testing IQ and stuff, that's to see, like, if there's, like, a spiky profile, right? Like, cognitive struggles, differences, needing learning support, whereas OCD, this is much more like, I would call it a secondary mental health disorder. It's, like, on top of neurodevelopmental stuff. It's clinical, and it really deserves talking through it. The thing I thought of before, I just pulled up the YBOCS or Y boxes you call it, Kate. For example, one of the obsessions that you could check the box. I fear doing something embarrassing,
Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
And
babe, same.
Yeah,
in the
don't know.
instructions, like, they tell us to define, like, the
Mhm, mhm.
intensity that it has to meet, but
That's
I
true.
think that also, though, for some of us who are very strong feelers, it's tough to know, like, well, does that qualify based on this person who wrote this definition, or who do I compare myself to?
Right. And we have a tendency to be a little literal too, you know, whereas in theory, a neurotypical person might be more prone to be like, well, not most of the time. So whatever. Whereas we might be prone more to being like, well, yeah, sometimes that happens. So yeah, but, but, case in point, like fearing doing something embarrassing, often that's a learned rational fear for a lot of autistic people and
Yeah.
ADHDers too. Yeah.
Like, that's such an interesting, like, "Hey, so we're pretty sure you might have a doubt-based nervous system," let's call it, right? So we're
Mm,
gonna have you answer these questions that are super open-ended and kind of strange, and make sure that you have a doubt. Like, does that make sense? Like,
jeez. That's funny.
I'm afraid of doing something embarrassing would make me then doubt, like, oh, like, is that like normal? Am I not supposed to be embarrassed by anything? Like, how often are people like that? Would just get so much more in my head if that was how my nervous system worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
funny. It's true. Yeah.
something like that also is where the conversation helps, because if someone says, "Oh yeah, that's me," and you go, "Okay, yeah, tell me more. When do you feel that fear the most?" And they say something like, "At school because, earlier this year somebody did something embarrassing and got recorded, posted on TikTok. It just sucks for that person." Maybe not. If they say, well, because if I do something embarrassing, I'm not going to get accepted into college. Something's going to be recording me and it's going to put it out there. Everyone's going to know about it. I'll never be able to live it down. I'm going to embarrass my family. Like, if there's this story,
Yeah.
that usually leads me to be like, okay, I think we're in OCD territory.
Yeah. That's a good example. It makes sense. Yeah.
Cool. Well, and the final part of that question was, is there a way I can know if I have OCD without going to an evaluation? So we kind of
Mm,
answered that a little in the last one, where yeah, there's some tests online. I think you can also listen to other folks who have OCD and see if that story, that narrative they've got, kind of mirrors your experiences. But it also sounds like going in for the eval with someone who knows how to do those evals might get you a little further into like the treatment world and support.
yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well said. Yep.
Cool. Shall we head over to our fancy after hours program?
Ooh,
Yeah, let's go to the bonus content.
sweet.
Okay, so we're going to hop over to Patreon to record our guest bonus content, Hit Me Again, which should now be streaming on a private podcast stream for our paid members. Tiers starting as low as $4 a month. And your support as paid members helps us to fund the main podcast. So we are so, so appreciative. Thank you so much for listening and for patroning, whatever. Over there on the bonus content, we're going to talk about how to tell if it's limerence, a special interest, or OCD that's causing this listener to quote unquote stalk their crush. So we're going to get into kind of those different ways of being very intensely interested in somebody. So if you want to hear it, make sure to head over to Patreon um, and get a listen in. And then you can also expect new episodes weekly on Tuesdays. You can find Karissa on Facebook or Instagram at Divergent Pathways, or check out her links in the show notes. You can find Kate at Cryptid Learns, me at Radical Insights Consulting on Facebook or Instagram. You can add a .com to either one of those for our websites. You can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at Aces Up Your Sleeve Pod, so you can interact with us and see when new episodes release. If you have questions for us, we want your questions. We eat them up. Yum. Please visit neurokink.org/AUYS and send it our way. We'll see you over on Patreon.